Thaddeus Kościuszko is so underrated. I know he has a bridge named after him, and a mountain, and an island, and a bunch of statues. But I've talked to several Americans in a row who have never heard of him. Have you heard of Thaddeus Kościuszko?
Who?
He was a Polish military engineer. He was centuries ahead of his time. His valor in the American Revolutionary War helped turn the tides in America's favor. He won every battle he fought in the Polish-Lithuanian War. He led a revolution, and he fought to free peasants and slaves until his dying breath. How long ago did she leave? After you said engineer. Did you just shit? Thad was born in 1746 in the Polish-Lithuanian Commonwealth. His family was wealthy relative to their 30 serf families, but they were poor relative to other nobility. The Kościuszko family treated their serfs very well, which was rare. His father's example led Thad to believe in equality way before it was cool. He wanted to free the serfs, while everyone else wanted free serfs. After his childhood and the death of his father, he began studying at the Royal Military Academy in Warsaw. He was a charismatic and hard-working student. Thad received a promotion to lieutenant, and after a few years of being a teacher, he was promoted to captain. Then, a civil war broke out, and Thad was unable to pick a side, so he just left. He received a scholarship from the king to go study in France. While in France, he studied philosophy, engineering, military strategy, and painting. When he returned from France, he learned that his brother Joseph had lost most of the family fortune on a series of bad investments. Yeah, I mean, anyone can download it, but I own it on the blockchain. The blockchain is the future, man. This is going to skyrocket in value like Bitcoin. Now that he was broke, he could not afford to purchase a commission in the army. You've studied military strategy for years, you excelled in school, and already have the rank of captain. We would love to bring you in as an officer. $5,000, please. I don't have any money. With his military dreams on hold, he found work as a tutor for a noblewoman named Ludwika Sosnowski. Thad and Ludwika fell in love almost immediately. When Thad proposed, her father said, "Does are not for sparrows, and magnate daughters are not for petty nobles." Then he threatened Thad with imprisonment or death. Ludwika and Thad were separated, and she was forced to marry a man of higher nobility. This event is believed to have instilled a deep hatred of class distinctions in young Thaddeus. Our hero was now unemployed and heartbroken. He needed to get out of Poland. So he went back to France. The French were all talking about the American Revolution. Yeah, she just said Hawk Tua in a TikTok, and now she's like super famous. Huh. I guess that's what revolting against the British does to your country. Wait, what happened? Well, some guy was doing TikTok street interviews, so he sailed for the Americas in 1776 to join the Continental Army. After arriving in Philadelphia, that's the wrong era. After arriving in Philadelphia, he sought out Benjamin Franklin. He found Franklin at his print shop. Yes, you should marry a woman. But make sure to pick older women as mistresses. Thad did not have any letters of recommendation, so he offered to take engineering exams. He scored remarkably high on a geometry test and was soon assigned to the Continental Army. In 1777, Thad was posted to Fort Ticonderoga. He suggested they put cannons on a hill overlooking the fort. We should probably put some cannons up there. Nah, man, have you walked up that hill? Imagine rolling a cannon up there. It'd be impossible. Your socks would get wet, your pants would get all muddy, probably ruin the washing machine. While they retreated, Thad knocked trees into the road and destroyed every bridge they crossed. The British got stuck, and the Americans escaped with minimal casualties. Now that they were safe, Thad was tasked with finding a defensible position and fortifying it. He found a spot overlooking the Hudson at Bemis Heights and laid out an array of defenses. His fortified position was impenetrable for the British, and the Americans eventually forced them to surrender. The win marked a major turning point in the Americans' favor. When news of their victory reached France, King Louis XVI realized the Americans had a chance to win, so he began sending soldiers and supplies to them. Thad's work in the Battle of Saratoga received great praise. Following the victory, Thad was transferred to West Point. Washington considered West Point to be the most important post of the war because whoever held West Point controlled the Hudson River. So he sent his best military engineer there. Thad was tasked with designing fortifications. His fortifications set the standard for the Continental Army. The British never captured West Point. It is now the oldest continuously operated post in the United States, and they host a Kościuszko Day there every year. While at West Point, an African-American orderly named Agrippa Hull was assigned to him. Thad treated Hull as an equal and a friend, while other officers used corporal punishment on their orderlies. After he finished his work at West Point, he requested to transfer to combat duty with the Southern Army. Washington approved. Fun fact, Washington spelled Kościuszko 11 different ways throughout the war. During a campaign in North Carolina, Thad was responsible for building bateaux, finding places for camps, scouting rivers, fortifying positions, and developing intelligence contacts. His contributions were instrumental in preventing the destruction of the outmatched Southern Army. During the race to the Dan, the Americans were chased over 200 miles by Major General Cornwallis and his British Army. They would have been unable to escape if it weren't for the bateau. Thad chose the site they would go to fight Cornwallis. The Americans were outmatched and defeated, but they practically destroyed Cornwallis's army. This led to the Americans eventually being able to retake South Carolina. Thad suffered his only injury in the war during the reconquest of South Carolina, when he was bayoneted in the butt while attempting to attack a fort. Thaddeus spent the rest of the war fortifying American bases and taking part in small operations towards the end of the war. Thaddeus conducted a fireworks display on the 23rd of April, 1783, to celebrate the signing of the Treaty of Paris. Thaddeus had not been paid for his whole 7 years of service. Hey guys, can I get paid? Why don't you host another fireworks show in New Jersey for the 4th of July? After hosting another fireworks show and receiving a promotion to Brigadier General, he finally received $12,280 to be paid out in installments and 500 acres of land. The following year, in 1784, he left for Poland. In Poland, he was able to secure a small piece of land, and he only made his male peasants work 2 days a week, not making the females work at all. His estate quickly became unprofitable. A few years later, in 1789, Thaddeus received a commission as a major general in the army of the Kingdom of Poland. Thaddeus became closely involved with political reformers and argued that peasants and Jews should receive full citizenship status. We should give peasants and Jews full citizenship status. He believed that if they were given full citizenship status, they would be more motivated to defend Poland in a war. Thad did not get his way, but the reformers made progress and introduced a new constitution. The constitution maintained the monarchy and did little for the peasants and Jews. Some magnates still opposed the minimal reforms because they were bad for business. So they formed the Targowica Confederation and asked Catherine the Great, Empress of Russia, for help overthrowing the constitution. Today, In Poland, the word targowikin is still synonymous with traitor. Thanks for helping me move, man. I really appreciate it. Oh, no problem, man. You've always been a good friend to me. Targowikin. 4 days later, 100,000 Russians headed for Warsaw, starting the Polish-Russian War of 1792, also known as the Defense of the Constitution. Thad once again displayed his brilliance. The Russians invaded with a 3-to-1 advantage in strength. This allowed them to attack across a wide front with 3 armies. Thad proposed merging the entire Polish army into one, but Prince Poniatowski rejected his plan. As usual, Thad was right, and the Poles found themselves fighting in 3 smaller divisions and struggling to hold the river defensive line. Thad's force was assigned to protect the southern flank. At the Battle of Dubienka, he skillfully utilized the terrain and his fortifications to defeat 25,000 Russians with only 5,300 Poles. After the heroic victory, King Poniatowski offered Thad the Order of the White Eagle. But Thad was a Republican. He disagreed with the existence of the monarchy, so he refused all royal honors. Thad had unfinished business with the Russians, but the king requested a ceasefire. Then, the king betrayed Kościuszko and the Poles and joined the magnates who had started the war. Targowikin! This capitulation was a massive mistake, because the Poles had decent chances to hold the Russians off. They had just won a battle, and the Russians had not proven that they could break the river defensive line. What followed was the second partition of Poland. Russia and Prussia took substantial territory from Polish-Lithuania, and over 1/3 of its population now lived in Russia or Prussia. Unlike the king, Kościuszko wasn't going down easy. Thad organized an uprising. He gathered an army of 6,000 and marched on Warsaw, receiving the title of Commander-in-Chief of Polish-Lithuanian forces. He led a group of peasants on an infantry charge and scored a victory in the Battle of Roklawica. After meeting with other leaders of the uprising, he released a political declaration, the Proclamation of Polaniak, which stated that serfs were entitled to civil rights and reduced work obligations. Thad remained morally strong, even when fighting traitors. After a mob hanged a prominent Confederate, he condemned the act and told his insurgents no more lynching. Hey, cut that guy down right now. We do not lynch people. How the hell did he just float up there like that? The fighting continued, but he was eventually wounded and captured during a Russian attack. The uprising did not last long without him, and after its end, 20,000 Warsaw residents were massacred. The third partition of Poland ended the existence of a sovereign Polish and Lithuanian state for 123 years. 2 years later, Thad was pardoned after giving an oath of loyalty to the new Tsar Paul I. Paul I even gave Thad 12,000 rubles. Thad later attempted to return the rubles while renouncing his oath. With his heart broken again, Thad returned to America, where he received a warm welcome from the people. A year after his return, he received a bundle of letters from Europe. One letter caused him great excitement. He heard that Polish soldiers were fighting for Napoleon against the Prussians, so he planned to return to Europe one last time. Before leaving, he finally collected the rest of the money he was owed by Americans and wrote his will. Hey Thomas, you know how you've been a close friend of mine for years? Yes. And you know how the one thing I've fought for my entire life is freedom for everyone? Yes. I want you to take my entire American estate and use it to buy as many slaves as you can, free those slaves, and send them to trade school. You can have all my money. All you have to do is free a few slaves and send them to trade school so they can get good jobs and be fairly compensated for their work. By the time Thaddeus had passed, Jefferson claimed he was too old to act as executor of Thaddeus's will. Jefferson also did not want to free any slaves because he valued private property and states' rights over ending slavery. Some historians speculate that if Jefferson had carried out Kościuszko's will as Kościuszko wanted, slavery could have ended earlier and the Civil War could have been avoided. This is because Jefferson was incredibly influential, and when he spoke, other slave owners listened. His will reached the Supreme Court 3 times, but tragically, none of the money was ever used to free or educate slaves. When he arrived in France, he met with Napoleon, and the two despised each other. "You're a wannabe dictator! You're a fool and you overestimate your influence in Poland!" Who would have thought that a man who only valued power and a man who only valued freedom and liberty wouldn't get along? Thad correctly believed that Napoleon would not restore Poland, so he distanced himself from politics. Shortly before his death, he attempted to emancipate the peasants on his small piece of land in Poland, or what was Poland. The new Tsar Alexander, disallowed this. "Hey man, I decided to free my peasants on my piece of land." "No, they're my peasants on my land. I can emancipate them." "No." Thaddeus Kościuszko died at 71 after falling from a horse, developing a fever, and having a stroke. Does anyone else smell burnt toast? Kościuszko's contributions to the Americans in their Revolutionary War were pivotal. If the Americans had lost the Battle of Ticonderoga, it would have been much harder for them to win the war, as they may have lacked French support. He did not lose a single battle against the Confederates in the defense of the Constitution, despite always being severely outnumbered. Thad was almost always right, but was often ignored. If the King of Poland had listened to him and continued the fight, the Polish-Lithuanian Commonwealth may have been able to hold on, which would have prevented the second and third partitions of Poland. And even after his cowardly king betrayed the people of Polish-Lithuania, Kościuszko didn't give up on them. He marched on Warsaw with an army of peasants against the Russian army and occupied it for several months. All American children should learn about Kościuszko. He was a brilliant military engineer and strategist. He dedicated his life to the pursuit of freedom. He stuck to his principles even when he was incentivized to go against them, and he never backed down when fighting against oppression, no matter how strong his enemy was. In some ways, his love life foreshadowed the rest of his life. It is a great tragedy when a strong and competent man is held back by weak and incompetent men of higher nobility. Thank you for watching. Please subscribe.
Do it.